All right. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar. We're so excited that you are here joining Jennifer and myself. This webinar is all about surviving the realities of a COVID-19 workplace. Welcome to 2020. Yes, we are excited to bring you this information that's going to be informative, interactive, and is going to be really resourceful for you and your teams. I'm going to turn the webinar over to Jennifer first. She is going to be talking all about the legal side of the realities of a COVID remote workforce. And then I will go next and I will talk about more of the soft skills, the people development, and how you yourself can stay more motivated. Jennifer Grady is a lawyer and she is here in Irvine. We know each other from the Irvine Chamber and we're so excited to bring you this webinar today. Take it away, Jen.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. I feel motivated just listening to your introduction. So we have a lot to cover. I'm very excited today. So we're going to go through quite a few topics from a broad high-level view. And the point of this is to point out issues that you may not have thought of yet and to give you an idea of what you need to explore more. And if there's anything that Lauren and I can help you implement or documents we can help you prepare or training, we're happy to do that. So again, if you do have any more questions, please put them in the chat and we will address those. So let's get started. So just a quick background about myself. I am a lawyer here in Newport Beach, Irvine Chamber, California, and I practice employment law, immigration law, and business law. So we act as outside counsel to companies that are rapidly growing and expanding and need to have someone on their team to reach out and ask questions, help with training, and help with the various steps of employment. And then we also do their visas and contracts as well. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So you're here because you probably have remote workers or you're working from home yourself, and you might want to know what do you need to do legally or how can we motivate our teams to work remotely. So first I'm going to go over telecommuting agreements and checklists. Then we'll talk about whether your exempt employees can remain exempt while they're working from home. That may be something that no one's thought about yet, so we'll tell you how to figure that out. Timekeeping requirements for remote workers, since even though you're working at home, if you are a non-exempt employee, you will still have to keep track of your time. How about expense reimbursements? You may have heard that you have to reimburse employees for their cell phone use if it's in the scope of employment. Working with staff in other states. I know a lot of clients now have people, since you're working remotely, you don't have to be in the same city. So that opens up another level of requirements that we would need to look into. How to distinguish between employees and independent contractors under AB 5. So you may have heard about that law. That's going to be on the ballot actually in November. Best practices for working remotely. We'll summarize everything. And then I'm really excited to provide you a list of helpful technology to use in managing remote teams. So let's get started. So telecommuting agreements are something that I recommend if you have an employee that is working from home now that most people are out of the office. I've heard now that about 67% of employees are working at home, whereas before COVID that was about 7%. So that is a huge incremental change. It was really thrust upon everyone, and I spent a lot of March, April, and May helping people figure out how to work remotely and even reducing staff. So for the people that are still employed, we want to talk about telecommuting agreements. So this is an agreement between you and the employee that says that their relationship is still at will, and it's a privilege, not a right. So ordinarily before COVID, you would really only have this for someone who is able to work from home. It makes sense for you and for the employee. Right now, maybe it's not an option since during COVID your office may be closed, but in the future it's something that can be revoked at any time if it's not working out mutually. You want to talk about what are acceptable telecommuting locations. Is it okay if they're in a coffee shop? Do they need to be in a quiet home office? There was definitely a lot of kinks people were working out about that. You want to talk about defined workspace and distractions. I know a lot of people do have children working from home doing remote learning, we have pets, we have spouses. So we want to talk about when do we need to have that professionalism where we don't have any distractions, especially if it's with a client meeting or something like that. We'll talk about the work schedule. Is this something where there's defined hours, or is it a job where they just need to get it done by a certain deadline? That's something you'd want to clarify. Talk about acceptable methods of communication and expectations. So do you need to check in at certain intervals? Does email work? How about chat? And then at the end of this presentation, we'll talk about some apps that you can use to help with teamwork communications. Reimbursable expenses we're going to talk about next, and that is where you're going to talk about now that people are working from home, they might have to have a Zoom subscription. They may need higher speed internet if maybe they didn't even have internet or a laptop. We're going to have to talk about reimbursable expenses and equipment. Travel time pay if we are having people travel outside of what would normally be their commute to the office. Safety issues, and that is also where you would do a safety check and maybe look at the person's workspace through video chat or through photos, because even if they're at home, you can still be liable for any workers' comp injuries. And that may sound a little bit silly, but there is a case where a woman was working from home and she was getting fabric samples out of the closet and tripped over her dog and was injured. And so it was found that she was able to seek workers' comp for those injuries. So really just putting it in perspective, even though they're at home, they're really still working for the company. Huge issue is security issues. You may or may not have thought about that, what to do about firewalls, passwords, secure servers, what type of equipment, are they using their own laptop, are they using a company issued laptop? And then you want to talk about how to pick that up. So since people have been working remotely, they've had to terminate employees, and then how do you get that laptop back? Are you going to pay for them to ship it back to you? Will they come into the office and you pay them for that time? So these are all things that you should figure out. We always have clients create a company property checklist at the beginning of the employment, and that way we know what we've given out and what we need to take back. Then we would talk about what to do if an employee suffers any injuries, and so they would have to fill out a workers' comp form within a specific period of time. I always say within 24 hours. And then whether any homeowners insurance is required for the job and what those terms would be. So let's see what else we have here. And so we also have a checklist that we use, and that's where you would kind of go over all of those topics, make sure that you've done it and that it's something that both sides understand. So now that people are working from home, we would want to figure out if people are still exempt or not. And so a lot of people misclassify this as saying exempt is someone who's on salary, but that's not the exact definition. What we have to do is look at the wage orders, and I do have the link here on the Department of Industrial Relations website. And that is where if you're a professional, like a lawyer or accountant, or a technical job, a computer-based job, or, and I mean like a computer programmer job, or an administrative assistant, you may fall under one of the exemptions. And so now that you're at home, you have to make sure that you still qualify under those exemptions. For example, if you are a executive or a manager, you would want to you have to supervise 2 employees, you have to make more than twice the minimum wage, and most of your time has to be making independent decisions. So if somebody was experienced a reduction in force and now their hours have been cut in half, they might not be making twice the minimum wage and they may not be supervising people. So this is something you really should look at with a lawyer. If you haven't fully done that before, this is a good time to check up on that, because if someone is misclassified, it can lead to huge penalties, attorneys' fees and interest. That's something that you really want to make sure that you understand. So tracking employees' time is another issue. Just because they're at home doesn't mean that they're not clocking in and out for lunch, that they're not taking their rest breaks. So if you have done the analysis, you determine that they're non-exempt, and again, the default would be non-exempt, and you would have to prove that someone is exempt in order to be paid that salary. So they would want to clock in the morning, they would clock out for their lunch, and if they are working 6 hours in a day, they would get a 30-minute lunch, no later than the 5th hour of the workday, and then they would clock out at the end of the day. So morning, lunch break, and at the end of the day. And then they would also be entitled to 2 10-minute rest breaks if they're working a full day of a shift. So we don't ever want to auto-deduct time for meal and rest periods, because then the employee could argue that they didn't actually take that time. And if you don't have the records, you can't prove that they did. So the burden is always on the employer to keep these timekeeping records. So what we do is recommend that you contact your payroll company, whether that is K-Time HR or SCP or ADP or whatever company you use, or there's a bunch of apps that I will mention later in the presentation, and you can do those either from the computer, from your phone, and then if it is something that does matter that the employee is on site, for example, if they're a security guard and they have to show up to their post, you can have that so that it would show exactly where they are at the time that they're signing in, while maintaining privacy so that you're not tracking them at other times. And so here's some great resources that you can look up online, again, on the Department of Industrial Relations website, and they have a FAQ page on overtime, on meal periods and rest periods, and I refer to those all the time. You should print that out and review that, just so that you make sure that you know all the rules there. So then we want to look at your wage statements, which you're giving to your employees probably every 2 weeks, either bi-weekly or semi-monthly. And we want to make sure that their timekeeping is accurate before we are giving their wage statement, and you would want to be reviewing those each time, making sure that if they didn't clock in and out for lunch, that's something that's addressed. They can even be disciplined for not doing so. And you want to make sure that we're reimbursing them for cell phone use, internet use, and business expenses, and that's the next topic. And then even paid sick leave. This is another one that people miss. So for the last few years in California, there is a requirement of paid sick leave at least 3 days per year, and some cities have greater requirements, like LA has 6 days, San Francisco has more, Santa Monica, last time I checked, had 5. So you want to check all the cities in which your employees are working. I know for LA, if you work at least 2 hours per week, you're now subject to their paid sick leave laws. So if you're not sure, you can always get in touch with me and we can go over that and make sure you're doing that correctly. So expense reimbursement is a huge topic. This has been around at least since 2016. We have the labor code requiring that employers reimburse California employees for all necessary business expenditures or losses incurred by the employee in direct consequence of the discharge of his or her duties. So that would mean if you, for example, are a cashier and you're working on site, you don't really need to be using your cell phone in the context of the job. But if you're a driver and you're, say you work for a car dealership and you're picking up employees, you're probably going to be using your cell phone to keep in touch with the dealership and to talk to employees. Likewise, if you have a desk job, you're probably going to be using your phone throughout the day, especially if you're in sales, and you're probably using your home internet connection. So also, this is some nuances that have come up lately, is maybe you need to have some premium Zoom accounts, or you need to up the speed on your home internet, or maybe you didn't have internet, and maybe now that you're home all day, you're using your electricity and your utilities. So do I have to pay for everything, employers may ask? So it's only if it was a requirement of the job and a necessary and reasonable expenditure. So I went to Staples early on in the spring, and they were already sold out of desk chairs because people were upgrading their home office. So is the employer responsible for that? That's something that you may want to work out with the employee, and if they have to be sitting all day and they didn't have a home office, then maybe you do need to do that chair. But does it need to be $1,000 chair? No, because it has to be reasonable. So maybe something like a $100, $200 chair, something like that. That's what you would work out with the employee. And so you may say, all right, well, everybody already has a cell phone, and these days people have unlimited data. Why do I need to pay for their cell phone? So the law says that the company would not get the windfall of the fact that they have that, and you would still pay for the portion that you're using for work. So how do you calculate that amount? Some sample examples that we've come up with are, first, you can ask for copies of receipts and invoices. So especially if they're buying equipment, something like one time a desk chair, you're going to ask for the receipt for that. If it is their cell phone bill, you may want to see their last one, or if their amounts fluctuate, maybe the last few. And obviously you don't need to look at all of their call logs, but you would want to figure out what is the price that they're paying for their cell phone. Maybe you want to look at it to make sure you're not paying for their children or other dependents. You would want to just see what's the portion they're paying per month, and then determine whether they're going to give you this invoice on a monthly basis, or, for example, with cell phone and internet, a lot of companies are just coming up with one amount that they're going to do monthly, and that's going to be on their paycheck. So I think that's the simplest way to do it. So, for example, if their cell phone is $100 a month and 50% of the week they are spending it on the phone, then you would reimburse them $50 over 2 pay periods. That's going to be $25 per paycheck, and that is going to be a line item on their wage statement. That way, it's very clear, it's obvious that's what you're doing, and that would reduce any claims for not doing reimbursement. So that's what I recommend doing there. And so how can we pay, for example, a cell phone bill? So one would be you could pay the entire bill, or you could pay a reasonable portion. So again, if you're working 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, you're going to figure out what that is out of the week. And then you want to make sure that you put in writing that you can increase that at any time. So if you are picking that flat fee, you want to make sure that if they use more, that you're going to be paying for that extra benefit. That's something that's also a requirement. And so what are the consequences of failing to provide reimbursement? There's potential litigation by individuals or a class action, PAGA claims, which is where an employee can sue on behalf of all the other employees that work for the company, statutory interest of 10%, and attorney's fees. And all of this is in addition to the amount that you actually did have to pay. So if we are ever making a demand on behalf of an employee, this is a section that we could include, and that's going to add up quickly. And so you can't contract around this. This is required by law. So if you do need help, we can always help you figure out how to do this. Okay, so now that a lot of people are fleeing cities and moving elsewhere due to COVID, that now people realize they don't have to be in a city anymore, that means that a lot of people are moving to other states, or I've had clients that were already remote before, and they just happen to have a great candidate in another state. So this opens up another host of issues, because now you're going to avail yourself to the laws in the state where the employee works, because the laws are there to benefit and protect that employee. So before you get into something that you may not be aware of, we want to look at whether the relationship is at will and whether they can be an independent contractor or employee. So in California, we have one of the most strict laws on this, and I'm going to briefly touch on that later, but somebody in another state, depending on their industry, may not rise to the level of employee. So perhaps you can have them as an independent contractor, but that's an analysis that you should be doing with an attorney before you move forward. Then you're going to figure out what onboarding documents you're going to need in that state. We have a whole list of documents we use here in California, but that's going to be different in their state. And then, of course, you'll determine whether they're exempt or non-exempt. And so some of the topics that are going to be ones you're going to need to talk about with are taxation and withholding. So you're going to have to tell your payroll company about this. You're going to have to fill out new forms. You have to figure out if they have paid sick leave obligations in their state and what those are, what the onboarding procedures are, what to do about when they are terminated. So each state has different rules on when you need your final paycheck. In California, that's going to be the last date of employment if they're terminated, and there's a few more nuances there. But in other states, you can have 72 hours or up to 2 weeks. So that's something that you would want to know. How about anti-harassment training requirements and policies. California, you have to do the training every 2 years. I believe in New York, that's annually, and other states may have stricter or less strict requirements, so you're going to have to figure that out. And then what are your workers' compensation rules, and what type of labor posters do you need to give to them? And so you may say, well, they're at home. How am I going to give them the labor poster? You can go to each state's websites and download them there and send it to them as PDFs. And so you want to always talk with the tax advisor and an attorney who can be familiar with the law in that state before going down this road. All right, do we have any questions so far? Are we good? All right, so let's get into the toughest topic of the day, and that is AB 5, and that is the independent contractor law. So last year, Governor Newsom signed the AB 5 law, and this has been one of the most disruptive employment law changes in decades, and we're still dealing with it. I was dealing with it a lot in December, January, and then COVID really took over and took everybody's attention, but now I think that's coming back, and the state is definitely enforcing this and has not backed down too much on it. So there have been some updates and changes, I believe, for journalists and musicians, but for most types of industries, this law still stands. And for rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft, they have something on the ballot in November, Prop 22, and that is to repeal this law, but that's really only for drivers. So it's great if you're doing that, but if you're not, you may still be subject to this law. And so AB 5 is really a big deal, because if you do misclassify someone as an independent contractor when they should be an employee, there's a whole host of penalties and taxes and fines that could happen. And so maybe it looks like a small violation, but then when you add all of these up, now it can be a very expensive proposition. Okay, so the AB 5 really is trying to make things more simple by making this ABC test. And so there is a test for EDD, whether someone is an employee under unemployment. There's also a test for the IRS for taxes, but for in terms of employment law, we're looking at this new ABC test. And so in order to show that you're not an employee, you'd have to meet all three of these elements. So number one, the person is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract, in performance of work, and in fact. And so that's really how much are you telling the person what to do, giving them feedback, or not. So I like to use the example of an attorney. When you hire an attorney, you're not telling them how to do the job, you're hiring them for their service and their skills and their practice. Same with a CPA, they do the job, they come back and they give you a work product. So you're not controlling how they do it. Whereas if you have a secretary, you're really giving them a lot of feedback, telling them what to do, and they're doing things on behalf of the company. Next would be the person is performing work that's outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So if you were to hire a graphic designer and that's what they're only doing, that's going to be outside your work of whatever business you do. And then third would be the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business as the same nature as what's being performed. And so that would be if they're a graphic designer, that's the type of work that they're doing. So if you don't meet this ABC test, then you're going to have to be defaulted as an employee. And so there are many exemptions. That's what makes this law so complicated. If you print it out, it's about 8-point font. It's 5 pages long, and definitely speak with an attorney about how to get through this. So there are some exemptions, and so certain types of careers and job types are exempt from that, like lawyers, architects, engineers, accountants, securities brokers, investment advisors, private investigators, and licensed professionals like physicians, doctors, psychologists, veterinarians, and then insurance brokers as well. So that would be that they're exempt fully, but then we get into more complicated nuances of professional services. And so that would include people in marketing, administrators of human resources, travel agents, graphic designers, grant writers, fine artists, payment processing agents, photographers, journalists, writers, editors, and cartoonists. And so for them to be exempt, they have to meet about a 10 or 11 point test that's in the statute. And then they have to meet the dynamics, which was the case that decided this. So it's about like a 22 factor checklist that I would go through with the client to make sure that they meet all of these. And a lot of it is to show that they have their own independent business, they have their own office, their own website, they're advertising their services, how much investment are they putting into their equipment. So it's really to distinguish whether this is somebody just working on their own, doing things for you, or whether they have their own business. And even if I've heard a lot of people say, oh, just go open an LLC and that's going to cure the problem. It won't. You have to really meet all the elements of the test, and that's just one tiny piece of the puzzle. And so then there are other additional exemptions that I have here. There are also special rules for manicurists and hairstylists, and a lot of it really is going to come down to the control that you have and how independent this person is. And so I didn't put all of them here because I don't want you trying to figure that out on your own. Definitely seek independent counsel to make sure that you're doing this correctly. So if you do determine that someone can be an independent contractor, and sometimes we're able to make that determination, then what we would want you to do is keep records of the documents. Remember, I said you would need to show that you have your own business license, your own LLC, you advertise, and so you would ask the person for that, like copy of their operating, their articles of incorporation or organization, or their business license or their website. And then you would draft an agreement that is compliant with AB5, and it's going to outline that they do have all of these and they certify that they have met all of those requirements. And so if you decide that they actually should be an employee, then you're going to have to take additional steps, and that would be, we're going to be converting them from an independent contractor to an employee. And so what does that include? Several steps. One is notifying them in writing of the change in status, and usually that would be with an offer letter that's going to have all the terms of employment. Onboarding them with numerous documents and payroll documents as well, like W-2 forms, payroll forms, different things like that. And then employee handbooks, and keeping a good personnel file and record. So what we do is create a checklist that you can fill out and update, and then always have all the different documents throughout the life of the employee all in one place, so that if anything does happen later, you have copies of those records. All right, so now that we've gone through, we have these employees, we're working with them on a daily basis. How can we manage these remote teams? So the documents, or the programs that I'm going to talk about in the next few slides, are all in this blog, which you can find on our website at gradyfirm.com. If you go to the blog section, that'll be the first one there, and it's going to have hyperlinks to all of these different types of programs. And so the first one we have on here is project and team management, and this is probably the most important. This is going to be the basic place where you're going to have all of your documents and files. Some of these do have chat features. Clio is one here for lawyers. I've been using that for 8 years, and that's where we have documents, case files, timekeeping, invoices, all in one place. So a lot of great options here. If you guys want to go ahead and put in the chat, if you do have something that we haven't listed here or something that works really well for you, please put that in the chat. So next would be task management software. If any of the ones on the prior screen don't include a task feature, or you need a more robust one, I use Teamwork, and that is where you can also track time and milestones. And Trello, I believe, is a free software that you can put it in tiles and columns and move things around. So CRM software is crucial if your business needs clients or sales, and that is where you're going to track all of your leads and what stage they are in their pipeline. And there's some great options here like Pipedrive, Salesforce, Dubsado, and some of these you can integrate with other types of software like document signing or drip campaigns. So timekeeping we talked about earlier today. If you have an employee that's not exempt, that's crucial. So you can check with your payroll provider. You can also use apps on the phone or online. Calendaring apps are great to eliminate that back and forth when you're trying to schedule with someone. I actually use all three of these, and people can access them from blogs or websites, or your receptionist can fill those out. And that's a great way to take some steps out of your day. Virtual meeting platforms. A year ago, I found people really we're struggling. We went through a lot of the growing pains of using Zoom and video chat. So there are some that are free, like Google Meet. I believe that was Hangouts. Now this is kind of automatically in your G calendar, and Skype, and then GoToMeeting and Zoom are great, and they have different tiers of services and fees depending on how many people you would need in your meeting, and if you want extra opportunities for branding and things like that. So document signing, really crucial. That really took out the need to meet people in person. There's some great options here, DocuSign Hello and PandaDoc. Password management. I've heard now that people with kids in school spend half the day trying to help them log into all of their different classes. And I know every time I sign in somewhere, they want a different password and make you change them all the time. So here's two great password management that I think are really helpful. Newsletters, you may have already been working with these with Constant Contact and MailChimp. They're free, they're great, and they also have opportunity to upgrade if you want more features. Document management is also crucial when you're working with teams. You're going to need a secure server and place where you can put all of your documents, and the Google Suite is great because you can monitor it in real time, and you don't need Word or the Mac version of Word. Virtual receptionists I put in here because people had asked earlier, what do I do if I don't want to give out my cell phone to a client as an employee? And that would be, I think a virtual receptionist is a great option because you can put one number for your company, people call in there, and then the receptionist will call each employee on their cell phone. So using Abby Connect, they have actually a portal where you can hear the calls and you can hear how it goes with the receptionist to make sure everything is working out, and then they can text and email you your message. So definitely, if you haven't looked at a virtual receptionist, now's the time to do that. So just to sum up best practices, considering the impact of remote working on confidentiality for company information and your own client information, and in tandem with that is consulting with an IT expert to maintain security on personal devices and on company devices. Consider cybersecurity audits to make sure that this is actually working. Consider how to have property return when employees leave. I know a lot of times people do not get back keys or laptops or uniforms, so you want to figure out what to do there. And one of the few times an employer can collect money is when you have a uniform deposit. So that's always something we can explore. Conduct regular check-ins during your scheduled workday, and you have to figure out if someone is on call or not, because if you're having them wait around, then they would have to be paid for that time. Have a signed telecommuting agreement and review that, over the phone with your employee. Work with counsel and tax advisors on these policies and procedures, and enjoy your shortened commute time. And it can be a blessing or a curse whether you're at home with family all day, but let's really enjoy this downtime and try to do other hobbies or do our work more efficiently. And I think productivity really is actually up since COVID-19. And so we have a lot of the documents we can provide for you. We have packages that have all these onboarding documents, telecommuting checklists, even COVID-19 return to work policies, and you can get those online on our page. You can follow us here or add me on LinkedIn. And then you can always schedule a 15-minute complimentary consultation to talk about any of the items we discussed today. So thank you so much, and I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, unless you have any questions.
Great, Jennifer. Jorge did have one question that he posted in the chat, and it's about converting 1099 employees to W-2 employees.
Yes.
It's in the middle of the chat there.
Okay, so Jorge wants to know if it's smarter to convert them on January 1st. So I have had somebody ask me that in terms of a tax perspective, is it going to raise a red flag? And I've asked CPAs that, and they didn't really say yes. I think the important issue is if they've been misclassified, you want to get that fixed right away, because for every day that they are misclassified, that is more time that they would add to any misclassifications. So I have done plaintiffs' work where we write a demand letter for misclassification, and we're going to do it from the day they started until the day of the letter. And so each day is going to have penalties and interest. So I think some people want to wait or drag that out, but if you know that it's time to do it, I would just say to do it right away, because that law has already been on the books since technically January 1st of 2020, but some of it's even retroactive based on case law to the year or two before. So definitely something to look into right away. And thank you guys for putting your which tech that you like. That's really great.
Very great. Yeah, so good to be in community with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great, Jennifer. All right. Okay, well, if you are here, turn your video on if you can, because if you're eating your lunch, it's fine, no problem. Besides Jennifer and myself, I hope you're all eating. So if you want, put it on, because we like to make it a little bit interactive. That was some great information. So stand up if you need to, move around. Maybe you've been moving around because we can't tell. And let's dive into some things that we can do, because we are mostly working remotely, right? You came to this probably not because you are maybe an essential worker. You probably came to this because you have employees and you wanted legal advice, which Jennifer gave so many great things, Jen. That was incredible. And luckily she's recording this, because unless you're taking screenshots of each slide, you're going to need to connect with her afterwards and ask her those questions. So many things. I'm Lauren Sweeney. If I haven't met you, I'm a trainer and a coach at Rise Up For You. We are an education company. If you have people issues, we can help you. Not on the legal side. And that's why Jennifer and I thought, let's pair up together, because we both do not do what the other person does. I don't do anything on the legal side at all. Timekeeping, all of those things. I take care of workplace conflict management issues. I take care of diversity, equity, inclusion training. Any soft skills development, that's what we do. So let's talk about we're working from home, right? Workforce prediction. So as you know, the remote workforce is huge. And like Jennifer said, people are even moving out of state and continuing to work remotely. And as she was talking about, using the use of management tracking systems as well. All of these things, and we have access to more professionals worldwide. So great for having more access. And like Jennifer said, great that we also have less commute. That is absolutely fantastic. But there are a few challenges. Yes, there's challenges to sitting in the same chair all day long, or going to Office Depot and all the nice chairs are sold out, right? And then you have all these legal issues too that you have to worry about and figure out. So there's a lot on us as leaders, as managers, as people in our company. There is the expansion, though, of virtual learning. What are we doing right now? Being able to tap into. So I wanted to give you a couple of workforce, not just predictions, but also the benefits of having access to more people worldwide. Now, the main thing that we all need is those soft skills, though. We need to be able to communicate with each other. And because we're working remotely, the nuances of an email, a text, some type of virtual communication can be difficult. So we need to work together to figure out, all right, what can we do so that I can still communicate? Because I can't just go to the coffee pot and talk while I'm making my Keurig about how are things going. I can't just go up to my employee. And some of you may be taking your employees back into the office, and then there's more headaches and hassle there as well. Legal issues, things that you're going to have to work out with your HR, or if you are the HR, that you have to figure out yourself. So what do we do about it? I want you to type in the chat, what do you think are the top 5 things that you need to help making this remote environment work better? So anything that you could think of, what is something that you think you need to help make this work better for you and your employees. So type something in the chat, a soft skill, something that you think you need. Hey, it can even be better coffee, okay? A manager of time management, absolutely, Kamran. So time management is definitely something that we teach, and I have a lot of tips on that. While people are typing in the chat, did you know that the use of color, the use of a highlighter is scientifically proven to increase dopamine in our brain? And did you know that when dopamine's increased in your brain, it makes you happier? Okay, Lauren, is this the happy webinar? No. But when you're happier, you will be more productive, and so will your employees. So for example, when you are making, keep posting in the chat, top 5 things you think you need to continue productivity by working remotely. When you make your to-do list, even if it's virtual or it's on paper, and you use some type of color to check things off, or you do something to create a reward for yourself. Yes, I know we're all adults. We're not in kindergarten. I know we don't need stickers. Yet can become very mundane, doing the same thing every day and sitting in the same spot with the same ring light. It can become like tedious. So we have to do things that gives us a little boost. And before, it used to be going outside and maybe taking a walk, and we can still do those things, but we're not in a group or a team environment. Let's see what others are saying. More interactive communication with your staff, absolutely. Hiring someone to help you do team building, or creating something where you can have communication. Maybe it's even doing something safely, socially distanced, or doing something interesting on Zoom, using breakout rooms, doing something non-work related, like playing charades on Zoom with your team to create that sort of camaraderie that is missed by not eating the lunch together or doing those things. Customer service, thank you for improving communication with your team, keeping your team motivated and engaged, because you don't see them all the time. If they're working remotely or partially working remotely, that is a top challenge. Exactly. Keeping them motivated so that you can employees finish things on time. Work prioritization, Jorge, yes. Weekly huddle meetings works well for you, Todd. Yes, yes, absolutely. Let's go in and come up with some solutions. One thing that's super important is EQ or EI in the workplace. So listening skills, communication skills, having the self-awareness. So when we teach EQ, there's 4 modules, and under those 4 modules is 18 competencies. Oof. I'm taking a nap just listening to that. 18 competencies. Oh my goodness. There's the awareness of ourselves and self-management, and the awareness of others and our team management. So how can a lot of you put in the chat, how do I motivate people? How can I have better awareness of myself so that I stay motivated? And then how can I have better awareness of others so that they stay motivated? One key thing that we have done with our teams is had one-on-ones and asked questions. You might say, Jennifer, what motivates you? Or I know you're working from home. Is there something that we can do that would help you stay more engaged? Sometimes it is the simple things like changing up their environment. I know companies that have even hired a firm to look at, and this goes with what Jennifer was saying about safety, but they don't just do safety. I know people who have looked at the ergonomics of how is the chair that the employee's sitting in. Do they have something that makes them happy? A candle, a scent. It may seem really menial, like, really, Lauren, you want me to buy candles for my employees? Not necessarily, although it might be a nice touch, but what are things the employees can do to declutter their workspace? See, when they go into the office, their brain, and that's why I have the picture of the brain here, clearly says, hey, I'm at work. When they go home, their brain is like fighting with them all day, and maybe fighting with you too. It's saying, I'm at home, but I'm working. No, I'm working. I'm supposed to stay motivated. I'm supposed to stay motivated. So what are things that we can do in our environment? And this may be a conversation you want to have with your team. All right, team, what are things in your environment you can do? If you're working in a room that is not an office, what can you do so it feels more like your office? Because location has an impact. For example, if you work on your couch, you eat lunch on your couch, and you watch TV, maybe have a glass of wine at night on the same couch, it is confusing cognitively for the brain. We need to delineate our space. And some of our employees may be in very tiny 500 square foot apartments. We still need to encourage them to delineate their space. Now, we are not supposed to tell them necessarily what to do, but we can encourage them to find a corner. How can they make this corner of their room or this room feel like it has more of a workspace feel? Their productivity and your productivity will go up. How can we clean off our desk? What are things we can do? Because see, everybody can only see me from the waist up. So you don't know if I'm wearing jeans, pajama pants, leggings, or a professional skirt, right? We don't know exactly what's going on, but when we as professionals dress up, take ourselves seriously, clean off our workspace, it makes a big difference, and our cognitive brain will therefore make us more productive. Okay. This is the slide. This shows you these things. This may be helpful for you to look at and go, where is my self-awareness right now? Where am I at with my self-management? What are things I can do to get 1% better? I have a few tips for you. This little notepad here is from Target. It was in their dollar section. You may be into electronics, and that is fantastic. I'm super into electronics too. However, there is something about having something physical. This could be your to-do list, but this could also be your personal self-care. Lauren, isn't this about being at work? What does that have to do with self-care? I know, but with COVID and working at home, and if you have kids at home and everybody's at home, everything is disrupted. And so we still need to maintain good, healthy habits. I guarantee you'll be more productive, and so will your employees. Let's talk about certain things. Are you still taking time in the morning to set yourself up for your day? Maybe you meditate, maybe you have a devotional time, whatever is important to you. Those things still matter. Working from home is dangerous because we can literally roll out of bed, jump into our email, but that creates no delineation for our brain to say, I'm at home, okay, now I'm switching to work mode. Maybe you're not getting your workouts in, and maybe your employees aren't either. Perhaps at the office, you had a gym the employees could use, and now that is taken away. You still want to provide the employees some type of health benefits. What are things that you can do with them? Can you encourage them? I know a company I work with, they bought a yoga membership that all their employees could have access to. It was a remote learning platform, and they gave that as a gift as part of the perks for their employees. What are things you can do so the employees can still create something in their environment where they can still take care of themselves, because they will be more productive? If you are into learning about EQ, these are a lot of the different modules that we work on with our clients. And these are things you may have seen if you've worked with us before. All of the top ones have to do with accurate assessment of yourself. And you may want to take a screenshot, and I would highly encourage you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. Where am I at with adaptability? Goodness gracious, probably almost a 10 for most of us, because we've had to be so adaptable with COVID. Where am I at with my intrinsic motivation, transparency, accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence? And where am I at with relating to others? So all of the ones down here on the bottom relate to others. Am I service oriented? Do I have inspirational leadership? And how can I increase that? Maybe I pick up a new book on Audible when I'm taking a walk in the morning to clearly, cognitively make sure I start my day with myself and then move into a work mode. How can I be a change catalyst? Where I would highly recommend that you rate yourself. Where am I at with developing others? How am I at with my empathy? And what is something that I can do to get 1% better in these areas? Because it really does make a difference. As I was saying, all of these things add up together so that you can better manage yourself and manage those around you. A lot of you were talking about, how do we work with each other? Diversity and cultural intelligence. We are today, maybe you're working with people even not just in another state, but another country. The ability to display sensitivity, awareness, and effectively work, prosper, and innovate all relate with people all across cultural contexts. Did you know that the number one thing that we see when we go into a company and work with them on company culture, or maybe diversity, equity, and inclusion, or just inclusion and awareness and workforce productivity, is they say, I don't bring up things that bother me because I don't think anything will be done about them. That is the number one thing that we hear, is I don't bring problems to HR or my boss because I don't think anything will be done about them. What is something that you could foster in your work environment so that people, maybe even anonymously, put in solutions, not complaints, but solutions they would like to see that would make the company even better. And when people support what they themselves create. So if you're looking to seek more productivity from employees, ask them, employee Sam, what do you think would make you more productive? How would you rate your productivity on a scale from 1 to 10? When you become the coach and you start asking questions, it really makes a difference, and it makes the employees feel heard and seen, and I guarantee more bought into the company. Let's dive in a little more about what you can do or encourage your employees to do to change things up, to gain more intelligence, because it will make you more productive. It will make you more satisfied at work. Certain things I don't think we realize have been taken away from us with COVID in the environment. We are used to traveling more. We're used to going to festivals. All of those are mostly non-existent right now. So we have to intentionally look for more exposure to different cultures, which stimulates our senses, which makes us happier, which makes us more creative and more productive. Taking part in conscious conversations. Again, we are not in community with each other as much right now to just pick up the phone, maybe schedule a meet that has nothing to do with work, just to stimulate our senses and our creativity, and have a little friendly debate about something that has to do with maybe a topic with people that are not like us. It will make such a difference, and that is something organically we might have done before. Creativity. With the ability to think creatively and outside the box, we and our employees can come up with solutions. And isn't that what we want? It becomes draining and tiring to make all the decisions, let alone what to eat for dinner. Us running a business, running a company, there are so many things that we are navigating. So let's talk about a few things that may help us with our creativity. Well, we are working remotely, and even when we go back in. If you have an idea, I would love to hear it. Post it in the chat. What are things that we can do so that we can become more creative? Even standing up, a work desk that is more elevated for our ergonomic posture. Something, maybe even a standing desk. I saw the most creative thing on Facebook yesterday with remote learning for children. Literally, it was a bike, and the mom had put the training wheels of the bike in these tennis shoes. Have you guys seen this? It's gone viral. And the girl was doing her distance learning while moving her legs, moving the bicycle. Genius, because everyone learns in different ways. So imagine you have an employee that is a kinesthetic learner, and they're sitting all day in one spot on Zoom. No wonder their productivity's gone down. Right? If we think, I know this takes a lot of effort and work, but if we take a step back and instead of just blaming our employees, I know we need them to be more productive, but we might take a step and think, gosh, I wonder if they're not speaking up at the team meeting because they don't feel safe, or is it just because they're super bored? Like maybe they just don't learn well. And you say, well, Lauren, how else am I supposed to conduct my team meeting? It's virtual. I know, but what if you ask the employee who's maybe not speaking up or participating as much? What if you ask them to take a part of your team meeting? What if you ask them, hey, Bridget, would you run XYZ of our meeting? Oh my goodness. The involvement, the inclusion, the making her feel important. What a difference that could make. And everyone is different. I love that, Jorge. Put away your electronic devices. Yes, I intentionally charge my phone in the kitchen so that I can't roll over at night and just pick it up and just go to it and scroll mindlessly. There's nothing wrong with scrolling. There's nothing wrong with binge watching, eating too much, etc., except that it takes a toll on us. Yes, Kamran, I love that. A hard stop at 1 p.m. Ooh, fantastic. Those boundaries make such a difference. And then we will have the ability to think more critically and come up with solutions together that, even if you work for yourself and you have no employees, maybe you call up a friend, maybe you call Fareed on here and you say, hey, let's bounce ideas off of each other. This is when I notice I'm not productive, or I notice if I moved this meeting to 9 a.m. versus 2 p.m. when I'm the most tired, I might have more critical thinking skills. These little changes can make such a difference for you to help you connect the dots and create more solutions. Critical thinking with others can really help your productivity. A growth mindset. We've probably heard this term used more now than ever, in that we are always learning. And that is why, Jennifer, and I thank you so much for jumping on this webinar today, because when we have a growth mindset, when we are continuously learning, building self-confidence, redefining failure, recognizing how we learn, it will really make a difference. This is where you can contact us. And right now, some of you have been through it. I know Jorge went through our first one. Kamran has signed up for our next one, and others on here as well we have a free professional development club. You can text us at this number here, 949-416-0671. Just text the word club and it will send you the link. Or here's the link right here on the bottom. It's a 5-week professional development school. You also, of course, just like Jennifer said, can reach out to us. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and set up a meeting so that we can help you with these soft skills. We can help you make better use of your remote workforce. We would love to open it up, Jennifer and I, to questions that you may have, or comments, or things that you have learned. You can unmute yourself or simply type in the chat. Thank you so much, Meg. Thank you, Jorge. And thank you guys for participating, being engaged. We hope that you were able to learn something and make it a little bit easier for you and your staff.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to bring in a question here, but we will be sending out this recorded video, which you can share with your friends and colleagues, or review some of the great tips that Lauren has provided to you today. So Lauren, I'm wondering, what is one of the most creative things you've implemented to work with your colleagues or coworkers since COVID's happened?
Well, a few of the things that we've done that's really made a difference creatively is doing team building creatively. So literally getting on Zoom together and playing some type of game that maybe you would get together and play with your friends when you were in college or something like that, just to get to know each other. The other thing that we've done is had think tanks where we literally get together. Most of our team lives locally in California, so we'll get together and socially distance and throw quote unquote ideas on a board and come up with solutions together. That has been really helpful, since we're all sort of piecemealed and working separately, to have us feel like, okay, we have a team and let's come up with things together. The other thing creative that we've done is, after we run a program, a webinar, a conference, anything like that, we always have a debrief. And it's not just a regular debrief, but it's a literal, like, put out the poster boards, use color, use markers. Yes, we have all the tech, but there's something about getting in it together and seeing the posters and saying what worked well, what didn't work well, and where can we take this? What do we want our next quarter to look like?
Okay, so trying to take it back old school, if you will, and really getting that non-tech involvement. Excellent.
Because we're not overusing our tech, we're utilizing tech, and we love tech. It's fantastic. However, there is something about going backwards and using paper and markers, and there's something about that ignites a different sense in our brain and our body.
Right. Does anyone on here have Zoom fatigue by now? You can raise your hand. I know Jorge does. So it's great when people do want to get out and meet in person if that's something that works for them and is available. Okay, great. Any other questions from anyone who's still online here?
I don't have a question, Jennifer, but I just want to thank you for your time today. You covered a lot of ground and you kept it really interesting. I know that HR stuff, a lot of people can find it boring, but you kept it interesting, and you made it easy for the layperson to understand. So thank you for that. And Lauren, love your energy. I'm part of the Rise Up For You Club, so all that information's I already know. So thank you for your time. This was a great presentation.
So welcome, Jorge. Thanks for being part of the community.
Well, thank you guys. If you do have more questions that come up afterwards, you can feel free to email us, or if there is a topic you'd like to see in the future, let us know, and I'm sure we would be happy to do another webinar for you.
Absolutely. Have an amazing day, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.